Hey, I'm Lynn Danaher, and I'm here to moderate this amazing film that you guys really put a lot of heart and soul into. I'm so impressed and so moved with it. And Steve and I both belong to the Explorers Club, so I really wanted to moderate this film and find out exactly what it was, for one thing, that really motivated you. I think the ending kind of told me what the motivation was. And I live in Hawaii now, and I've lived there off and on since 1967, and it's a multi-ethnic, multicultural environment, which I absolutely love living in. It's like the way the world is supposed to work is the way I've always felt since the 60s when I first went there. So bravo to you guys for telling this extraordinary story. I'm just, how long did it take? I'm really curious. How long did this film take to put together?
It took, we started,
6
I
years.
think around 2014
Can you turn
is
it up?
when, 2014 is when we first, I think, started to talk about the idea. Stephen mentioned to me. I think we started filming and really doing a proper research the following year. So about 2015. And we finished basically last year, and then we were held up for a year because of the, well, we all know why we were held up for a year. Yeah, it was about 6 years, 5 or 6 years in total.
That's pretty impressive.
Mhm.
The host has unmuted your mic. I'm trying to figure. Can you hear me?
We can
You
hear
guys?
you.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, terrific.
Yes, we
You're
can
very
hear
clear.
you.
What was the primary motivation? I mean, just out of curiosity, was there one incident specifically that really really got you going in terms of this particular subject?
I mean, I think it was really Arthur and I had done a previous project, a previous documentary and a book. The documentary was called The Poseidon Project, and it showed at Friday Harbor Film Festival.
Right.
And, after that, we were looking at a couple of different subjects, also maritime history, but, just different stories, some better known than others. And it was really this story that it bothered me the most. It was the one that sort of kept me up at night. And, after a while I started to say, Arthur, I think we really need to look at this Titanic story. I think there's really something here. And I think it's, a little bit urgent that we do it because it could be appealing and somebody else might pick it up and do it. So, let's get started on that. So it was really just, those kinds of questions that keep you up at night, just what happened to these men? Why isn't there more material about them? Where did they go? And, how did they get there? How were they treated? And where did they end up ultimately? And where are their families now? And what memories do those families have of them? That was really what drove us, I think. And that was what really made us think that, we've got something here and we need to kind of pull at those threads and see what we're able to discover.
On a project like this, it's you start off on a project like this knowing it's going to take a long time. So the way you structure a documentary, how you get it made is, I think it's different every time you do it. On Poseidon, the three of us were involved. My brother was co-directing with me. On the Six, Stephen and I started it ourselves early on, and at the beginning it was very much, Stephen doing the research, me sort of chipping in here and there and filming it. And as the story took off and we realized that it was going to work as a film, that we were going to find new things, there were going to be descendants, there was going to be a human story, and we needed to expand it. We were very lucky. We had a lot of interest as we posted trailers and things online, and we ended up knowing about midway through the project, as Luo Tong joined us as producer, that there was going to be a potential to put this on the big screen, that it was going to be a theatrical release. And so it became a bigger project, and we were able to pull in the resources to make it something that, had 24 researchers and a proper crew to film it, and we were going to be able to give it the, what it felt like it deserved at that point.
Wow, I was so impressed with the amount of research that you folks were able to pull together from across multiple countries. I think maybe just about every continent you actually ended up doing research. And I was astounded by the depth of the research and what you were able to learn about each individual. That really was like the fellow that ended up in Calcutta. I mean, I wonder what his story was. It would have been so wonderful to know the rest of his story. And visiting the village where two of the gentlemen came from, and the reasons why they left, and that they actually represent a fairly large population of Chinese that immigrated. I just, bravo, you guys. I really, I wanted to know how James Cameron got involved.
Luo Tong, do you want to talk about that?
At the very beginning, we were trying with Steven and Arthur. They were trying to approach him, because who wouldn't want to talk to him about something related to Titanic? That was the very initial thought about getting some answers from him. But it was very difficult because he was surrounded by agents, lawyers. A lot of people were and are still protecting him. So I think it was around the time when we almost finished all the shooting, and we were saying to each other, we were like, let's try a final go and write him a sincere email. So Arthur drafted the email and sent out a bunch of just any emails that could lead to him. Our another EP, he gave us like 20 email addresses that would eventually go to him, and then we sent out the email. I think within a week he got back to us and said, "Oh, I already heard about your project and I'm very interested. Let's have a talk." So Steven and Arthur, we immediately flew them to New Zealand when he was still shooting Avatar 2, and they had a lovely chat, and we filmed the interview, and he got a lot of great stuff from him. And right after the interview, he suggested, "Do you need any help? Would you like me to be your executive producer?" And we were like, yes. Yeah, of course. So there we go. Hey, he became our executive producer, and he gave us a lot of help on like getting footage sorted out from Fox, from the original film, and also he made a lot of effort in promoting the film when we were releasing the film in China. So we are really grateful that the fact he would be on board with us.
I found it so interesting that that having Rose survive on the door was directly tied to one of the six surviving by finding a door. That just gave me chills. And those sequences that he allowed you to use were so perfect. And the way you edited it all together, it flowed great. And I also want to compliment you on your graphics. Some of the cartoon graphics that you did, I don't know who did those, but they were very effective and really helped tell the story moving forward. So really,
yeah, we were really lucky with that. It's always a balance, when you look at a film that has this number of visual and audio elements, it's always a balance of trying to not have one overwhelm the others. And I think with Titanic, it becomes especially important to get that right. You don't want to overwhelm the film with too much footage from Titanic, but we should be so lucky, to actually have the footage to use. So you've got to find a way to balance those out. And then, of course, we wanted to find a way to represent the story of the six who were not carried by the Titanic film, other than the fact that Cameron had shot a couple of, he had the one of the Chinese guys in the background of a couple of scenes, and then he shot this, what for us became an extremely iconic scene of the man we know to be Fong Long, although Cameron didn't know that was the name, but he'd created the scene of the Chinese man floating on a piece of debris and being rescued by lifeboat number 14. In fact, that was the key reason I think that we originally wanted to reach out to Cameron, because that scene contained, you know, this incredible detail, and very few people know of that story. It wasn't a well-known story. You couldn't find it easily. So there was something about that. We thought, well, how did he know about that? You know, where did that idea come from? And at the center of it was this thing that the three of us talked about many times, which was, is it possible that he actually based the Jack and Rose final scene on that? Because it became clear to us in the course of the research that the idea of people floating on debris, although it's a sort of it's a potent visual idea, and we sort of associate it with the Titanic. In fact, it barely happened. There were very, very few people who floated on debris. There were very few people picked up out of the water. Only one, possibly two lifeboats went back and pulled people out of the water or off debris. So there was only a handful of actual examples of that happening. And lifeboat 14 in the film is the lifeboat that picks up Rose. And so we thought, is there a possibility that Cameron actually based it on that scene? And we were able to confirm that while we were speaking to him. But yeah, combining those elements, the animation. The other thing I liked about the animation was doing it that way was when you film something or you reconstruct something, it becomes by default photorealistic, which means you have to cast, you know, you have a Chinese cast, you have a look of everyone. Everyone has a face unless you deliberately obscure it, but by default you would see it. So I wanted to reflect the uncertainty of our researchers. Whenever I wondered, you know, what's the POV of this film? You know, whose story are we really telling? I would always come back to the idea that at least internally, I knew that we were telling the story of the researchers, and it was through their eyes that we were looking at the story of the Chinese man. And so for the animation, it just seemed a great way to do that. Because in animation you can really properly not have the faces revealed. You can have things on the screen that you can't see. You can reflect uncertainty. So that was how we ended up with those. But it wasn't something we knew we were going to do from the beginning. It was sort of another piece of the jigsaw puzzle that we ended up working out. Oh, well, if we do it that way, then at least it works. It makes sense. It makes sense of that underlying story.
Well, it was really effective with the sound.
It was a Korean. Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was a Korean animator. We were really lucky. She was a bilingual, and she was really into the story, and she followed every bit of the details of the story. And she worked with us throughout the entire post-production, and to understand how, and you know, the kind of feeling that we want to express through animation. And then it was a collaboration between the editor and the director, and then her line of work. It was amazing that she produced such great work.
Mm.
And hey, Steve, getting in that water, I thought that was a torturous process. How low did your temperature get?
Well, the water was 12 degrees Celsius, so I'm guessing that's sort of the 50-degree range, high 40s. They wouldn't let me go in colder water than that. You know, I would have been willing to try, you know, 2 degrees or you know, as close to freezing as we could get to really simulate what, you know, people who ended up in the water would have experienced. I mean, Lynn, you know well from ourselves and our friends at the Explorers Club, you know, it's not good enough for us to just think about something or to theorize about something. We want to go and do it. And so in this case, you know, I think there are two instances in the film, both that the sort of dunk tank scene, and then also the the lifeboat scene where we reconstructed the lifeboat.
Yeah.
You know, there was no other way to answer those questions effectively than to use scientific methods to answer historical questions. Those were just things we had to do. And I remember when Arthur and I first talked about, well, we've really got to build a full-size lifeboat. It's not going to work if we just do a small model and stick some Kens and Barbies in there and whatever. Nobody's ever going to believe that, and it's never going to be realistic. And I remember, we kind of looked at each other like, well, we don't really know anything about building a boat, but don't worry, we'll figure that out, and we did. But it was just, those were historical mysteries that we had the opportunity to solve once and for all. And I felt it was really important that, that we just go and do it. And as I say in the film, that day in the cold water, I was the volunteer. So, sometimes you gotta put yourself out there. So, but it wasn't too bad. That doesn't mean I haven't gone over to the Wim Hof lifestyle where I'm taking cold showers every day, but for 35 or 40 minutes, for the sake of what we were doing, it was absolutely worth it.
It was great. And what I also love the fact that you involved all those young people in building the lifeboat and getting in the lifeboat and actually going through that process, because they can somehow on a very small level reimagine what it might have been like. And I just thought that bringing that, because this is this new generation, unless they've seen Titanic, they probably don't even know the story. And, it's one of those astounding stories that I grew up with. And then, of course, James Cameron made the movie, which I couldn't wait to see. And I just think that it's so interesting that these young people, did they all go out and see the movie after helping build the lifeboat?
I mean, some of them had graduated. I know that others have had a chance to see it since then. Mark Trumple, the teacher, is still there. The design teacher is still there. He saw it with me one day and was just, I think he finally understood what it was that we were asking for when he saw it on screen, But I mean, they really hung in there. I mean, they were working outside on very cold days. And I think for them, it wasn't necessarily an interest in Titanic per se, because when I first went out there to talk to them about it, it was obvious that probably half the students had not seen the Cameron film. Obviously they had a familiarity with Titanic, but they had not seen the Cameron film. And, they just saw it as, hey, here's a chance for us to do something really different. They really got into the process, downloading the old plans from the Englehart boats, creating new, CAD drawings and, just getting ready to do it. And then, getting in there and planing things down and fixing the sides and painting and the whole thing. And, even down to that last day when we're actually getting into the lifeboat and, being a participant in that. And the reality is, we didn't know what the answer was going to be. We did not know what we were going to find as we were getting into the boat, and they didn't either. And it's, obviously we're there on dry land, but it was still kind of a voyage of discovery. And, the answer was so simple. In the end, the answer was so simple that I think we were all surprised. I think Arthur was surprised. I was surprised. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, that's the answer. But unless we did what we did and built the model and filled it with real people, we just were never going to know. And I'm glad it's a mystery we solved, but I'm also glad for what it did, which was give a number of men back their dignity after more than a century of unnecessary shame.
Thank you. I love the scene at the end when you put out the lanterns. I mean, that brought tears to my eyes. It was so meaningful because it was really honoring them finally after all this time, all of them. And anyway, it just was really, I really appreciate the story. I really appreciate it as well because of what's going on in this country right now. And it just so disturbs me. I can't fathom any kind of Asian hate, Black hate, whatever. It just doesn't register with me. And so I don't understand it. And I just really appreciate, I think this is an important story because it shows how determined these immigrants were to make it in this country, and how, and what they gave up. And they were giving it up, not just for themselves, for their future generations. And I just was very, very moved by the whole concept and the whole story. And I really thank you for making the effort. I think it's an important story. And is it going to the big screen? Do you know?
It was released in China.
Huh? Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Luo Tong. Yeah.
It was released in China in April, and it received a lot of great reviews. We were really happy with how it turned out. I mean, the whole process of making this film is also, you know, because we have people from all over the world, and we basically the whole time we were speaking between Chinese and English, and then people from North America, people from South China, people from England, you know, all the researchers at High, we had 20 something researchers. I mean, they're not just researchers, because it's not like this film is not like a normal archival historical film. It's basically every researcher is like a detective. We follow them around, like Steven. He's like, we don't know what he was going to find out. We just film him and see how it becomes. He might, you know, that water scene. I was gonna say that we had to, as a producer, I had to sign with some kind of guarantee that if anything happens at the lab, they are not going to be responsible for him. I am. So we were like very carefully monitoring him, and I was like, oh my God, please don't go wrong, because it was quite serious. And then also when we were building that boat, it took them a whole year to like putting every little piece together, and every week they got together. I mean, the students, they also had classes to go, but every week there's like 3 or 4 hours of their time. They would come and you know, work on building precisely to the design of the old design of that lifeboat, which was from 100 years ago. And there was a lot of effort was putting into making this thing happen, and our cameras were just following all of them around, like finding first-hand material. And those the whole process was really powerful to us. It's not just at the end we were moved by the film, but we were moved every step of the way to, you know, we argued and we debated, and then in the end we made something happen. We've made some great discoveries, and that was really powerful to me.
It is like a detective case. It's all this digging and research and going to all these ship's logs. And I mean, I was so impressed with how much research was completed in so many different areas, you know, immigration logs, ships, manifests, and things like that. So I'm sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I was just going to add to it that to speak to your point there. Yes, I mean that combination, the teamwork that was required. I mean, you got to bear in mind we didn't know any of this at the beginning. We didn't know how the team was going to look at the end. We didn't know who was going to be involved. We didn't know that we were going to go to Canada, to the US. So all of that was kind of created organically as we went along. And to speak to your last question about where it's going to be played and being on the big screen and so on, it's really important to us on a really special level on this film, because of the way that so many places and so many people came together to be able to take the film back to all those places. You know, right now we took the film down to Taishan, that area of southern China, in Guangdong province. We took it down there when it was on its theatrical run. I think I'm going to go down again actually in about a month's time and play again there on another event that's going to take the film back. So taking the film back to those communities is really important to us. Next month, it looks like we're very luckily, I think, working with Picture House to release the film, a limited release, but a release nonetheless, in the UK theatrically. So we're going to get a chance, hopefully, to take it to some of the big cities around the UK and do the same. And the festival run in the US that Friday Harbor is such a big part of is another part of that. And we just had a great chance. We played at Vancouver in Canada. We've got another couple of festivals coming up in Canada. So being able to take it out to different places just sort of feels like it's built into the DNA of this project. I get asked a lot. People will say, "Oh, well, this is a film. Clearly, it's going to work with Chinese audiences. Do you think other people will like it?" And I always say, we didn't make it for one audience. We made it for. It applies to so many countries. And this story, though, we didn't tell the story of every country where Chinese exclusion happened. I think, you've picked up. It seems to me, this is a formula for discrimination. What happened to them?
Right.
The Chinese were not the only people that were discriminated against. We obviously know that, but Asian hate's still a thing. But they were, in a sense, the original discriminated against community. They were, I think one of the historians said to us, they were the model for an illegal immigrant. There was no illegal immigrant before them. For the US, you were able to come in. There wasn't a concept of an illegal immigrant. They were made into that. And their experience, in a way, is the sort of it's the original version of an immigrant who is not legally allowed to come in. So being able to take that out and tell that story. There's an Australian story of Chinese exclusion, though we didn't touch upon it in the film. And actually, I think last night we had our network premiere in Australia on ABC. People have already reached out to us and are moved by the story. Though we don't touch on it, it feels relevant to so many different places, I think, and it feels important to us to be able to take it out and play it to those audiences.
Fantastic. You guys have done a fantastic job. I can't thank you enough for bringing the film to the Friday Harbor Film Festival. It's just, and of course you've met Karen and I was a co-founder with Karen, and I've sort of stepped away and she's taken on the lead with Mark, and they are doing a fantastic job with this festival. And of course, COVID has been challenging because we had to go viral with everything. But this is so satisfying to have these conversations and these discussions with the filmmakers like this, where we don't have to wear our masks. And, one final thought that I just was so intrigued by towards the end of the film, you were able to equate that Kun Lee was probably actually Bing Lee in the manifest. And so that whole thing of the name changing, which makes it a little more challenging. And there were 2 or 3 references to name changes, but I just found it, talk about digging deep. And thank God Bing Lee or Kun Lee, whoever he was, for sure, maybe it was Bing, was parroting what he'd been told by his father. But the fact that he actually was proud and actually told the story multiple times. And clearly he must have been overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude if he's running downstairs to give kids glasses of milk. That was a really sweet little vignette that you included that was really nice. And then the one gal, when you asked, what do you, what word comes to mind when you think of the struggles and what they went through? And she could only use the word grateful, which I wholeheartedly understood and appreciated. So thank you guys so much. Do you have any final comments?
I'll just throw in one. Now that I've seen the film a bunch of times in front of different audiences, the one statement that sticks out is Professor Chung-Wei talks about the other. This process of othering, always the other person. In this case, it was the Chinese. But if you read, other news accounts, in some cases, it's the Italians. It's always this sort of the foreigners, those people. And that has, especially in the U.S. now, this has infected so much of our dialogue. It has infected, it's always, pick your favorite epithet, the libtards, the Trump supporters, the whomever, the right, the left, those other people, those immigrants, those, add a color, whatever you like. And it's so poisonous. It's so poisonous because it's always the unseen other. It's not, oh, my neighbor or this person that I know at work, or this, this person that I grew up with. It's never someone that It's always this unseen other. And I think, Chung Wei brings that out so well in that statement, and it just kind of sat there, in the news reports, but it's so relevant to today. And I think especially with the incidents of Asian hate that we've seen, this year, it's not new. Unfortunately, it's not a new phenomenon. It's not something we're going to stamp out quickly, but hopefully a story like The Six shows that this has deep roots, and it leads us to better solutions. It shows us that the solutions are not going to be simple, but hopefully it leads us to a better solution of some kind.
Thank you. That is absolutely true. I completely agree with you. It's deeply troubling what's going on right now. And I think this film can have a positive effect in terms of understanding and appreciating what the Chinese immigrants, the Bohemians. I mean, I'm from Irish descent, and we were discriminated against too when we first came over. So I think it's really, really important we must always remember our past so that we hopefully don't repeat the mistakes we made. That was one of the things that Anne Frank wrote, is we must remember. So thank you again, each and every one of you, for such a fine film. I applaud you. Truly.
We applaud you too. Thank you, Len. And thanks
Len. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks to the Friday Harbor Film Festival. You guys are great.
Thank you.